The following is a production of Florida State University's Office of University Communications. Coming up on FSU Headlines: hurricanes and climate change. Do rising temperatures mean bigger storms? Ultraman. Florida State University tests the limits of extreme athletes. And one more for the trophy case. Florida State Baseball is your 2015 ACC champs. Stay tuned for these stories and much, much more. FSU Headlines starts now. Hello and welcome to another edition of FSU Headlines. I'm Dennis Schnitker.
And I'm Nora Bertollet. We're broadcasting from the beautiful William Johnston building here on FSU's campus.
Our top headline this month: climate change powers up hurricanes. According to new research by a Florida State University professor and researcher, hurricanes are becoming more powerful due to an increase in the Earth's temperature. Florida State professor of geology James Elsner is breaking down historical data to gain new insights into the strength and frequency of hurricanes. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Earth is roughly 1.5 degrees warmer than it was last century. And with that knowledge, Elsner set out to answer an important question: is climate change having an effect on hurricanes?
And what we find is that it does appear that we should see stronger hurricanes. The strongest hurricanes are getting stronger, but at the expense of the number of hurricanes. So there'll be fewer hurricanes, but the ones that do form will tend to be stronger.
Elsner's research is published in the scientific journal Nature Climate Change.
And speaking of climate change and its effects, a Florida State University researcher is traveling the world in search of answers about the effects of global warming on the carbon cycle. Rob Spencer, a Florida State University researcher and professor of oceanography, has spent months in Siberia, the Congo, and many other places throughout the world looking for new understandings about the carbon cycle.
And so as this old carbon that's been in many cases locked away since mammoths were roaming around, it's been now released back into the contemporary, the modern carbon cycle. And so the question we have is it just going to come out and sit there in the oceans for long periods of time, go from like one reservoir to another, or is it going to be utilized by microbes and go back to the atmosphere as CO2, drive climate impacts in these high latitude systems, and then cause more thawing of this material, more warming, more thawing, and get into a runaway scenario?
His latest research shows that centuries-old carbon is being released as the northern regions of the Earth thaw. That carbon is immediately decomposing and turning into carbon dioxide, feeding the global climate change cycle.
And so what this research really showed is where that old carbon is going. It kind of answered this question that we had, like, why didn't the two things link up? So that's got big ramifications for the carbon cycle, because it means that all this missing carbon, if you like, is going into the atmosphere as CO2.
A pair of Florida State students are headed on the trip of a lifetime. And no, this isn't just about sightseeing. They will study at one of the world's oldest and most prestigious universities. Richard Rogers is one of two students from Florida State receiving the Frost Scholarship. He's a student studying biochemistry, and now, thanks to this prestigious honor, he gets to further his education at Oxford University in the fall. Often synonymous with the Rhodes Scholarship, Oxford University is now more accessible to students in the state of Florida thanks to the Frost Scholarship. This relatively new program, endowed by the Philip and Patricia Frost Philanthropic Foundation, will allow Rogers to fulfill his dream of studying at the highly renowned university, earning a master's degree in pharmacology.
And I'm super pumped. I was really pumped. It was spring break, nobody was here, so I was like, who do I tell? My mom. So the first person I called was my mom, and we celebrated for a little bit. And then I took a nap. One of the first naps I've ever taken in college. It was great.
I think that it's really nice that a student like Richard is being represented with the Frost Fellowship, because he's somebody who's been practicing a lot of teaching and mentoring for other undergraduates here. So it's great that he's having a rewarding experience abroad where he's going to be able to put that same energy back into himself and developing on his own career.
Rogers will be joined by another Frost recipient from FSU. David Miller will study medical anthropology at the prestigious school. The Frost Scholarship will cover 100% of the university and college fees and also provides a grant for cost of living.
Okay, so far we've shown you how FSU spans the globe from campus to Siberia to London.
And coming up next on FSU Headlines, we'll be traveling back in time.
What we discovered after we cut up perfectly good dinosaur teeth and looked at what they were made of is that they're not made of two tissues like we typically associate with reptiles. Instead, we found in triceratops they're made of 5 different tissues.
We'll show you how triceratops have more in common with some of today's mammals than previously known. When FSU Headlines continues in a moment.
I've always been curious about things, and that really just leads you straight into science, because science really is formalized curiosity. One of the coolest things I've gotten to do at FSU has been conduct research with Sir Harry Kroto, and I was really surprised that I would get to hear directly from a Nobel laureate in chemistry, and then I was even more surprised to find out that he was just really accessible. Being here at FSU has helped me be the best student that I can be.
When you purchase a Florida State University license plate, you're supporting students, like me. Tag, you're in.
Welcome back to FSU Headlines. I'm Dennis Schnitker.
And I'm Nora Bertollet. Dennis, it's safe to say most of us have a fascination with dinosaurs. Just take this summer's blockbuster movie, Jurassic World, as an example of our interest in all things prehistoric. But in reality, there's a lot we still don't know about dinosaurs.
You're right, Nora, but luckily, we have researchers digging deep into history to find out what these creatures were like. And that takes us to our next story. FSU Headlines reporter Mark Vaughn sits down with biological science professor and paleobiologist Greg Erickson to learn what triceratops had in common with modern-day mammals and what it may tell us about evolution.
When you think of dinosaurs, big, sharp, scary teeth probably come to mind. Most of us imagine the long teeth of a T-Rex or raptor, like you can see in the dinosaurs in the summer blockbuster movie Jurassic World. But another dinosaur may have the most interesting mouth of prehistoric times. Florida State professor and paleobiologist Gregory Erickson became intrigued with the teeth of the triceratops.
Reptiles have teeth that don't come together, typically, except these ones did. And it just so happens that they became the dominant dinosaurs towards the end of the dinosaurs' reign. And I was curious how the teeth facilitated this process.
The Florida State professor found that the triceratops could chew its food unlike any other dinosaur. Reptile teeth of today are designed for grabbing and crushing, and it was assumed many dinosaurs were the same and weren't capable of chewing because that requires more sophisticated engineering.
Now, what's interesting about these teeth is, first of all, they had a slicing face, but also they are bowled out on the inside here. We're curious how that was possible. Somehow these teeth self-wear to have this bowled out structure.
This created more efficient feeding for the triceratops because there was less friction between the plant and the tooth. And it's a sign for Erickson that the makeup of the teeth was more complex.
What we discovered after we cut up perfectly good dinosaur teeth and looked at what they were made of is that they're not made of two tissues like we typically associate with reptiles. Instead, we found in triceratops they're made of 5 different tissues. And this is really significant. That's more tissues than you find in, say, a horse tooth, which is considered the most sophisticated mammal tooth today.
After analyzing the 5 layers of the triceratops' teeth, Erickson sent samples to Brandon Crick, an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at Lehigh University. Crick studies how surfaces of materials interact in motion. For example, how teeth interact with food while chewing.
We found that the material properties of these teeth are still preserved. And what I mean by that is the mechanics are still there, how hard the tissues are, how they wear. And so in these 70-million-year-old teeth, we were able to run what's called a nano-indenter diamond tip across the teeth, across the fossil teeth. And we could see how they self-wore and how each tissue contributed to make this bowling out that reduced friction when they fed.
The model developed by Crick and his team at Lehigh showed Erickson the teeth are functional in an animal today like they were for triceratops millions of years ago. The remaining question is, how many other dinosaurs had complex dental structures? Erickson and Crick will continue their research by examining other reptilian dental records and structures. Reporting for FSU Headlines, I'm Mark Vaughn.
Thanks, Mark, for that fascinating report. Erickson's work was funded by the National Science Foundation.
The Florida State University Institute of Sports Science and Medicine is studying Ultraman thanks to an ambitious Florida State athlete. We caught up with the Institute's director, Mike Ormsby, and his team in their race to discover how an athlete's body responds during ultra-endurance events. When the opportunity arose to help train former FSU athlete Chris Clark for an unusual race, Mike Ormsby and his team of graduate students were all on board.
So it was really neat to connect with him, start talking about options for his nutrition to offer for Chris.
After being a lifelong athlete and a Florida State University swimmer, Chris was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in his 20s. He battled to find balance with the often debilitating disease, but the former long-distance swimmer eventually found solace back in the water. During a workout, he met endurance coach and athlete Chuck Kimeny.
We were a little competitive in the water, and Chris came up to me at the water fountain after we finished the workout. And he said, "You're that guy." I was like, "That guy?" He says, "Yeah, the one who did the double Ironman and won it." And I was like, "Yeah." He says, I'm gonna do that race. I'm gonna do an ultra race one day." I listened to him and I gave him advice, and we stayed in touch back and forth, kind of encouraging him. Here we were, 3 years into our relationship, and Chris says, "Hey, I got accepted to Ultraman Florida." And he said, "Can you help me?"
With this new goal clearly in front of Chris, Florida State University and Mike Ormsby came into play.
And Chris was a go-getter. He kind of knew what he wanted to do. And so my suggestions sort of didn't always go through how I would have liked him and planned it out, but that created dialogue between all of us. And so a year, almost a full year went by, and we kept talking along that period for helping Chris to do this Ultraman. And at one of these conversations, I just said, we need to collect data on this. How can we do it? And Chuck was our connection to everybody in the Ultraman world.
Chris Clark was ready for the race of a lifetime, and now with the green light from the coordinators of Ultraman and approval for testing granted by FSU, he wouldn't be alone. Ormsby and a few graduate students were headed to Orlando to collect data on 20 of the ultra athletes. For Chris Clark, Ormsby was literally right by his side as part of his racing team.
There's 5 of us in this particular van, a lot of people with a lot of different experiences, all just going to get Chris through it. And then every so often we'd hop out of the car, Chris would take a quick break, we'd take blood glucose levels and lactate levels and everything to have more data on him, because he allowed me to go next to him the whole time taking these measurements.
The testing and monitoring didn't bother Clark. In fact, he actually gained weight during the race thanks to the continual nutritional supervision. Despite a few extra pounds, Clark not only made history as the first type 1 diabetic to finish an Ultraman race, he placed 6th overall. The race wasn't only a milestone achievement for Clark. The opportunity for graduate research assistant Chris Bach to study Ultraman is unlike any other.
The fact that we were able to do field work with these athletes and find out exactly what happens on the course, when they're swimming, when they're biking, when they're running, and in particular with Chris, with the continuous glucose monitoring that we did, to be able to see how it's changing every 5 minutes was really invaluable and really fun too.
The Institute of Sports Science and Medicine is now in a race of their own to complete the analysis and testing of these ultra competitors. And like any good athlete, they're already prepping for what comes next.
We want to just spread awareness for what's being done, and then start to look at how do we provide strategies to improve recovery, maybe get them back faster, or try to have them complete something like this long race without having as much muscle wasting, as much overall inflammation or negative effects.
In our next story, a unique relationship between male and female hormones could reduce depression in men. Florida State University scientist Mohamed Kabbaj is using a National Institute of Mental Health grant to study the effects of hormones on depression. Dr. Kabbaj and his collaborators have documented a way in which the male hormone, testosterone, and the female hormone, estrogen, work together to protect low testosterone males from the effects of anxiety and depression. He found that testosterone needs estrogen's help to inhibit depression. The research offers new insights into the causes of depression and the role of hormones in the disorder.
That really what happens is that testosterone gets converted to estrogen, and that's what gives you these effects. And also it tells you that in every individual, especially the depressed individuals, we probably need to also look at the levels of gonadal hormones, estrogen and progesterone in women, testosterone in males, and this is part of the individualized medicine.
And the research was published in a paper in Biological Psychiatry. Before students head home for the summer, there's some spring cleaning to be done. College students leave behind tons of leftovers, and instead of tossing the items in the trash, Florida State's Campus Sustainability Program hopes to make good use of those items during the Chuck It for Charity event. Take a look.
This is our last 3 hauls. We have Callum, Smith, and Sally left. You guys know the drill. Look in the bags, see what we need to take, bring it to the truck, and then we will be done for the day. So Chuck It for Charity is our student move-out program where we collect all the stuff that students don't want to take home with them, and we collect it, sort it, weigh it, and then redistribute it to local community agencies in support of their work and the people that they help. Every year is different. We never know what we're gonna get until we get into the halls. Always hundreds of plastic storage bins. Y'all can take those home with you, it's fine. Keep them.
Oh, y'all on the go!
Yeah. Just anything you think can fit in a hall will come out of a hall. So all of the stuff we work with about 25 to 30 different organizations in town, big and small, some really well known, some lesser known. Animal organizations, veterans organizations, faith-based organizations, the big ones, Echo, Goodwill, some in Gadsden County, so they come near and far, and everybody gets a little bit of everything. So yeah, reduce first, reuse second, and then recycle, and we'll always have an opportunity to share everything that we collect. But I think we need to change our message, honestly, to fit into the kind of things that we're talking about sustainability-wise across campus and make sure that people are hitting the entire spectrum of the 3 R's first. And I think it's time for us to change our message and remind people that all of this is perfectly usable, and they can use it again next year. In 3 months, they're coming back to school, and they have to outfit their apartments or another residence hall room, and so keep it, save it, you know, take it with you. I think that's going to be our main message going forward. Because really, you know, I'd like to see our numbers reduce, and actually think that people are going to be reusing this year after year after year. There will always be stuff, and we will always have stuff to give to our local partners.
And this year, Chuck It for Charity produced its largest group of volunteers ever and more than 15 tons of donated items.
Coming up next on FSU Headlines, Seminole Baseball brings home some hardware.
These young men deserved what they got because of the way they competed. I'm just very pleased to be a part of this.
We'll show you how the Seminoles got it done in Durham when FSU Headlines continues in a moment.
Welcome back to FSU Headlines. Nora, the Florida State baseball team had a pretty outstanding 2015.
You're right, Dennis. After winning 37 regular season games, the Noles took their talents to Durham, North Carolina for the ACC tournament in hopes of the team's first ACC league title since 2010. FSU Headlines reporter Mark Vaughn joins us now with more. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Dennis and Nora. The Noles found redemption in Durham. With a week of wins, the team took home the ACC championship trophy. The Seminoles taking out Louisville in the ACC title game to send them to the NCAA regionals. And with a quick turnaround, the Noles made their way back to Tallahassee to host those regionals. They faced multiple rain delays, but were still able to sweep through the tournament, defeating Mercer and College of Charleston to claim their spot among the nation's top 16 teams. On to the regional it was, set for a showdown with the rival Gators in Gainesville, fighting for a ticket back to Omaha. After claiming the Sunshine State Showdown earlier in the season, the Noles were unable to get it done this time in Gainesville, falling to the Gators Friday and Saturday night to end their season. Florida State finished the year with a 44-21 record, a small bright spot for the Seminoles after the weekend. They do end the year with at least 40 wins for the 38th year in a row.
I think you can see what our club was made out of, the way that we continued to scrap tonight. With the ball game basically over, we continued to battle. We're all up here very humble because we just got whipped. Tomorrow, I'll bet everybody in here $100 the sun comes up somewhere.
Now to the other diamond. The Seminole softball team was able to feed off their regular season success to play their way deep into the postseason this year. The Lady Noles opened postseason play with a trip to Blacksburg, Virginia, where they defeated Boston College, NC State, and Pittsburgh to bring home the ACC championship. And with that momentum, the Seminoles swept through the Tallahassee Regional and headed to Knoxville to play Tennessee for a chance to return to Oklahoma City. After a 3-2 loss in the Thursday night game of the series, Florida State evened things up with a big 6-1 victory over the Vols on Friday, but it wasn't meant to be this year. That night, the Noles fell short in the series rubber game, suffering a close 2-1 loss that ended their run. Florida State finished the season with a 49-14 record and a lot to look forward to, loaded with some young talent that will return to Tallahassee in the fall. On to golf and the Florida State men's golf team as they closed out their historic season at the NCAA tournament down in Bradenton, Florida. The Seminoles saw #1 next to their name for much of the season and entered the NCAA tournament with the #1 ranking and the top seed, both first for the program. The squad had high hopes of a national title but were unable to deliver, falling in the 4th round of the tournament and ending what was arguably their best season ever. Florida State advanced from the field of 30 to the round of 15 on Sunday, but needed a strong round on Monday to make up some ground and move into the top 8 and keep playing. But it just wasn't to be this year. FSU finished 10 over for the day and plus 29 for the tournament. It was the 6th top 15 finish at the NCAA tournament since Coach Trey Jones took over the program in 2003. But fortunately, the team returns its entire roster, so next year looks pretty bright. All right, guys, that's going to do it from Dick Howser Stadium. But remember, you can always keep up to date on Seminole Athletics at Seminoles.com. Back to you.
All right, Mark, thanks for that. Florida State University continues to be one of the most veteran-friendly campuses in the country.
That's right, Dennis, and one of the many ways Florida State supports its student veterans is by telling their success stories here on campus.
In this month's story, we introduce you to Marine Corps veteran Amanda Miller.
It does feel like a little family up here to me. I mean, I've been working here my entire time at Florida State. I absolutely feel like these people are my family, a little family. I joined the military because there wasn't really a lot of opportunities for me at home. I wasn't a good student, I wasn't a good kid, and I would get suspended a lot. I dropped out of high school and progressively got in a little bit more trouble, and then decided that I had to do something, I had to change something. I was in the Marines for 4 years, 4 years with HMLA 369, and we did 2 deployments to TQ, Al Qaeda, Iraq. When you say to somebody, I'm going into the Marines, and they say, what? Like you're going to the Marine Corps? And it's a challenge. I want to prove to myself that I'm able to do these things. I want to see where my limit is, sort of, you know? I left the military to go to school. I wanted to prove to myself that I was also smart, and that I could go to college and also be successful in college. I was 25 when I came to Florida State, so I was quite older than most of my schoolmates. Transitioning from military to a college student, That was the hardest part for me. I used to wake up in the morning and know where I needed to be and what I needed to do, and if I didn't do it, I was going to be held accountable. Now it's feeling like you don't wake up and do what you need to do for your team anymore. It's all you. It's all to benefit you, and it's all to your detriment if you don't do it.
We're gonna need some more coffee.
Make some more coffee?
Yeah.
Oh, she's busy. I'll make some more.
Oh, you're the best, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I'm the best, though. You don't really have to tell me.
I know. I figure I'd do it anyways.
Just meeting the vets that I have here, and you know, it's nice because they're going through the same things as you, and they have the same issues, and they have the same kind of mentality. And you know, especially the staff here, it's nice to know that there are people who come here every day and their job is to try to make my transition and my time here easier. And that helps, because then I kind of get to think of them as my team and the people that I wouldn't want to disappoint. They just make you feel like you're valued here. And that's a really good feeling to have when you are in a place where you're kind of the odd man out. I'm probably the oldest person in my class, including some of my teachers. So it's nice to have the school that you go to show that they appreciate you, what you've done. To have that degree in my hand and to have done something else, accomplished another thing that I wanted to accomplish. It feels really good, and I honestly, I don't know how well I would have been able to do the same thing if I didn't have this community here around me at Florida State.
You can see other student veterans' digital stories and learn more about the student veteran initiatives at Florida State by visiting veterans.fsu.edu.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of FSU Headlines, but you can see more news from Florida State University anytime at Florida State 24/7.
It's the official news website of Florida State University, and you can find it at news.fsu.edu.
On behalf of Nora and everyone else here at Florida State University, I'm Dennis Schnitker. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.